You're standing in the Forum as the procession enters Rome. The crowd roars. You can smell incense and blood. Behind the general's chariot, something moves, thousands of them, chained at the neck, stumbling barefoot on stone. Children, their eyes are empty. One falls, the chain jerks. The parade doesn't stop. This is victory. This is civilization. This is Rome showing the world what it means to conquer. And what you're witnessing right now, in this moment of triumph, is only the surface of something so much darker that even the Romans themselves struggled to write it all down. Before we step into that darkness together, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching this from? It honestly amazes me that a story this brutal, this buried, reaches across oceans and centuries to find us all asking the same question. How far can power go before it becomes something else entirely? Because that's what we're really looking at today. Not just battles, not just conquest. We're looking at systematic cruelty, refined into policy, celebrated in marble, and recorded with pride by the very people who carried it out. The Roman Empire didn't stumble into brutality. It engineered it, perfected it, turned human suffering into spectacle, and called it law. 146 BC, 2 cities burn on the same year, one in Africa, one in Greece. Both are erased so completely that archaeologists today still struggle to find their foundations. This isn't coincidence. This is coordination. The Roman Senate had learned something that would define the next 6 centuries: terror. When applied systematically, when documented and displayed, could conquer more territory than any legion. They called it odorant. Dum metuant, let them hate, as long as they fear. And they meant every word. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. These weren't the actions of madmen or monsters. These were calculated decisions made by some of the most educated, sophisticated minds in the ancient world. Men who quoted Greek philosophy, who built aqueducts and invented concrete, who gave us legal concepts we still use today. The same hands that drafted law codes were signing orders for mass extermination. The same engineers who designed the Pantheon designed siege equipment specifically intended to maximize civilian starvation. Brilliance and brutality weren't opposites in Rome. They were partners. Let's start with Carthage, where Rome perfected conquest. For 3 years, 500,000 people were trapped behind walls, while Scipio Aemilianus waited, not attacking. They understood siege warfare as psychology. Hunger, disease, despair eroded the city from within. By spring 146 BC, Roman soldiers entered not a city, but a living grave. Over 6 days, they moved with methodical precision, street by street, house by house, dividing the city among legions. Families were dragged into streets, the elderly clubbed, pregnant women cut open, children killed before parents. Polybius recorded it clinically, like an engineer noting a project, not with horror. 400,000 people died in those 6 days. But Scipio wasn't finished. After the bodies were cleared, and clearing them took weeks, the smell was so overwhelming, soldiers wrapped cloth around their faces. Roman engineers spent 11 additional days systematically demolishing every single building. They had techniques for this, ways to collapse structures efficiently to ensure nothing remained that could be rebuilt. Libraries containing centuries of Carthaginian literature burned for days. The smoke could be seen from the coast. Temples were dismantled, stone by stone. Art was either looted or smashed beyond recognition. And here's the detail that haunts me. They were so thorough that when archaeologists excavated Carthage in the 20th century, they found almost nothing of the original Punic city. Rome had erased it. The 50,000 Carthaginians who survived were sold into slavery. But this wasn't ordinary slavery. Roman law had a specific designation for them. Didici, people without rights of any kind. Their masters could kill them for any reason without legal consequence. They existed in a category below human, created specifically for survivors of cities that Rome wanted to forget. But wait. On that exact same year, Roman forces under Lucius Mummius were doing the exact same thing to Corinth, the jewel of Greece. 2 cities, 2 continents, 1 coordinated message. Resist us, and we will erase you from history. Corinth was the leader of the Achaean League, the last organized Greek resistance to Roman domination. It was wealthy, cultured, powerful, everything Rome claimed to admire about Greek civilization, which made what they did to it even more calculated. When Roman soldiers entered Corinth, they had learned from Carthage. They were faster now, more efficient. Every adult male was executed regardless of participation in resistance. Roman military records literally called this clearing the city of potential future leaders, but the women and children faced something different. Rome had discovered that sexual violence and family separation could destroy cultural identity more effectively than simple execution. Mothers were systematically separated from children before both were sold to different masters across the empire. The trauma wasn't just individual. It was designed to shatter the transmission of Greek culture from generation to generation. And then they burned the libraries. Centuries of Greek manuscripts, philosophy, mathematics, poetry, history went up in flames that burned for weeks. Roman soldiers, many of them illiterate, used priceless paintings as game boards. They broke sculptures for entertainment. Pliny the Elder recorded this with a kind of casual regret, the way you might mention scratching fine furniture. After looting everything portable, Roman engineers spent weeks demolishing the city with the same systematic precision they'd used at Carthage. They even performed religious ceremonies declaring the site cursed, uninhabitable, a warning to future generations. The psychological impact was immediate. Greek cities that had been wavering, wondering if they should resist Roman expansion, surrendered without a fight. Rome had shown them something more terrifying than military defeat: complete cultural obliteration. Your city destroyed, your people enslaved, your very existence erased from the earth and cursed by the gods. This was power beyond anything the ancient world had seen. But if you think Rome had perfected systematic brutality by 146 BC, you're wrong, because Julius Caesar was about to take everything they'd learned and apply it on an industrial scale. Between 58 and 50 BC, Caesar conquered Gaul. And here's what's chilling. He bragged about it. In his own writings, his own words, Caesar recorded that he killed over 1 million Gauls and enslaved another million. He wrote this down proudly, published it, used it to advance his political career. Modern demographic studies suggest he reduced Gaul's population by about 30% in less than a decade. 30%. That's not war. That's systematic extermination. Take the siege of Avaricum in 52 BC. The city held about 40,000 people, men, women, children, elderly. When Caesar's forces breached the walls, he specifically rejected offers of surrender. Roman military records are explicit about this. The city had to be made an example. His soldiers spent 3 full days methodically executing every person they could find. 3 days of organized killing. When it was over, 800 people had survived out of 40,000. And those 800 weren't spared out of mercy. They were deliberately kept alive to spread word of what Roman forces had done, to carry that terror to other Gallic communities. Caesar understood psychological warfare in ways that feel almost modern. He would deliberately leave survivors from massacres to flee to neighboring tribes. He wanted them to tell stories. He wanted the next city to know exactly what was coming. And it worked. Cities surrendered without a fight because their leaders had heard what happened at Avaricum, at Alesia, at a dozen other places where Caesar had turned execution into a science. But he didn't just kill warriors. He systematically targeted Gallic culture itself. Druids were hunted down and executed because they preserved oral traditions. Sacred groves were cut down. Traditional gathering places were demolished. This wasn't just conquest, it was cultural erasure, carried out with the same efficiency Caesar used for building bridges and fortifications. His engineers calculated slave captures the same way they calculated grain supplies. Human beings became resources to be harvested, processed, and shipped to markets throughout the Mediterranean, and Rome loved him for it. His Gallic victories made him the most popular man in Rome. They gave him the wealth and military loyalty he needed to cross the Rubicon and plunge the Republic into civil war. Systematic mass murder wasn't just accepted, it was the path to political power. That civil war would end in Alexandria in 30 BC, and what happened there represents something even more devastating than the destruction of Carthage or Corinth, because Alexandria wasn't just a city, it was the intellectual capital of the ancient world. When Octavian's forces captured Alexandria during the final war against Mark Antony and Cleopatra, they knew exactly what they were destroying. The Great Library contained somewhere between 400,000 and 700,000 scrolls, the accumulated knowledge of human civilization, works by Archimedes, Euclid, Eratosthenes, scientific discoveries, mathematical proofs, medical texts, literary masterpieces, all housed in one place, and Roman soldiers used them as packing material for art being shipped back to Rome. They burned them for fuel. They destroyed in days what had taken centuries to gather. The loss was beyond measure. Surviving references make it clear that the Library of Alexandria contained irreplaceable knowledge treatises on astronomy, engineering, medicine, mathematics works that would not be rediscovered for over a millennium. Roman soldiers, unable to comprehend the significance of the texts they destroyed, inadvertently set human knowledge back centuries. Yet this destruction was not the chaotic byproduct of warfare. Roman forces targeted Alexandria's intellectual heart with deliberate intent: the museum, the observatories, the medical schools, all systematically obliterated. Rome recognized that as long as Alexandria remained a center of learning, it represented an ideological challenge to their cultural supremacy. Scholars were killed or enslaved. Instruments of science were smashed or plundered. The devastation was so complete that Egypt would never again reclaim its status as a hub of intellectual innovation. The forced suicides of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, and her Roman ally, symbolically ended 3 millennia of Egyptian civilization as an independent cultural force. Rome had learned that conquering land alone was insufficient. True power required control over culture, knowledge, and memory itself, and they were mastering that art with ruthless efficiency. The Roman response to rebellion reveals the same calculated cruelty. In Britain, 6261 AD, Queen Boudica's uprising began as a desperate reaction to Roman abuses. She had been publicly flogged, her daughters violated. Her revolt initially met with success, but Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus sought not merely victory but total psychological domination. After defeating Boudica's forces at Watling Street, Roman troops pursued survivors relentlessly, slaughtering warriors, women, and children alike. Tacitus, writing decades later, described fields filled with corpses, 80,000 dead on the battlefield alone. Tribes suspected of supporting the revolt suffered systematic reprisals. Villages burned, livestock destroyed, populations enslaved. Famine deliberately engineered. Even Rome expressed concern, not over morality, but over the practical issue of depopulating a province, to the point it could no longer generate revenue. The debate over strategy, rather than morality, underscores the chillingly pragmatic nature of Roman terror. This pattern escalated further under Emperor Hadrian during the Bar Kokhba revolt, 132 to 136 AD. Jewish resistance to Roman religious and colonial impositions was crushed with unparalleled thoroughness. Roman forces killed over 580,000 people, sealed caves where refugees hid, razed nearly 1,000 villages, enslaved survivors under conditions designed to eradicate cultural identity, and forbade religious practice. Jerusalem and the province were renamed to erase historical memory. The trauma of this campaign reshaped Jewish history and identity for centuries, a testament to the devastating effectiveness of systematic cultural and physical annihilation. Even earlier, after Spartacus's rebellion in 71 BC, Rome demonstrated its mastery of terror as engineering. 6,000 captured slaves were crucified along the Appian Way, stretching over 100 miles. This was not mere execution. It was prolonged suffering, designed to terrorize and deter. Roman engineers coordinated logistics, construction, and transportation with cold precision. Travelers for weeks afterward encountered crucified bodies, some still alive, some decomposing, each a warning that rebellion would be met with meticulously calculated atrocity. And it worked. No large-scale slave revolts would ever again threaten Rome. The Roman Empire perfected the art of systematic violence, the control of memory, culture, and life itself, wielded with terrifying efficiency and foresight. Then there was decimation, the practice of executing every 10th soldier in units that showed cowardice or mutiny. Soldiers would draw lots, and those selected would be beaten to death by their own comrades with clubs. This wasn't random punishment. It was calculated psychological warfare that bound surviving units together through shared guilt and trauma. Roman military manuals provided detailed instructions for carrying out decimation with maximum psychological impact. This was institutionalized terror, refined over centuries into precise doctrine. But perhaps the most shocking example of Roman systematic violence comes from an act of treachery so extreme it shocked even Roman society. In the 2nd century BC, Roman general Servius Sulpicius Galba faced Lusitanian guerrilla fighters in what is now Portugal. Unable to defeat them militarily, he developed a systematic deception campaign. He offered peace negotiations, spent months convincing Lusitanian leaders through propaganda that Rome genuinely sought peaceful resolution. When they agreed to negotiate, he demanded they demonstrate good faith by laying down weapons and allowing Roman census takers to register their populations presented as standard administrative practice. The Lusitanians, desperate for peace after years of war, assembled in 3 large groups at designated locations with their families. They laid down their weapons, they trusted Roman promises, and then Galba revealed the truth. Roman soldiers suddenly surrounded all 3 groups and began systematic massacre. 30,000 Lusitanians who'd come seeking peace were systematically executed: men, women, children. The betrayal was so extreme that even Roman public opinion was shocked. It violated Roman concepts of honor and military conduct. but it worked. Other Iberian tribes understood that Roman offers of negotiation could be traps, that there was no safety even in surrender. What makes all of this so disturbing isn't just the scale of suffering, though. That's horrifying enough. It's how systematic it was, how celebrated, how legal. These weren't atrocities committed in secret by rogue commanders. They were official policy, documented with pride, commemorated in triumph parades, used to advance political careers. Roman law provided detailed legal frameworks that normalized systematic violence. Roman religious authorities provided spiritual justification. Roman historians recorded it all for future generations, not as warnings, but as examples of Roman greatness. The same civilization that gave us roads, aqueducts, and legal codes was simultaneously perfecting techniques of systematic mass murder that wouldn't be matched until the 20th century. The engineers who built the Pantheon designed siege equipment to maximize civilian suffering. The administrators who organized grain distribution organized mass crucifixions with equal efficiency. The lawyers who developed sophisticated legal concepts developed equally. Sophisticated justifications for systematic extermination. Conservative estimates suggest the campaigns we've discussed resulted in over 8 million civilian deaths through systematic violence. The destruction of Carthaginian, Greek, Gallic, Egyptian, and Jewish learning eliminated cultural and intellectual diversity that took centuries to develop. The techniques of deception, mass torture, and cultural destruction developed by Rome influenced European military thought for over 15 centuries. What perhaps unsettles me most is the way this history has been polished, sterilized for comfort. The Rome we are taught in school, noble senators, courageous legionnaires, civilizing barbarians, deliberately conceals the pervasive, calculated violence that underpinned the empire. We remember Roman law, but overlook how it codified atrocities. We marvel at Roman architecture, but forget it was financed through conquest, extermination, and enslavement. We quote Roman philosophy, but ignore how it rationalized cruelty as cultural superiority. Archaeology tells the truth that propaganda sought to erase mass graves. Raised settlements, layers of ash marking deliberate destruction, sudden population collapses, and fragments of survivor testimony revealing betrayal, torture, and systematic extermination. The evidence is stark and undeniable. The lesson is chillingly modern. Technological and cultural achievement does not prevent brutality, it perfects it. Roman engineering intensified sieges. Administration enabled industrial-scale massacres. Literacy documented atrocities as achievement. Violence became policy, terror became law, and murder was normalized. Rome's most enduring innovation was not aqueducts or forums. It was the methodical, celebrated, and recorded application of terror as statecraft. Its legacy endured for centuries, shaping imperial practices, colonial regimes, and modern administration. Beneath the marble and mottos lies a civilization built on the science of cruelty. Its lessons as relevant and as disturbing today as they were to millennia ago. Stand again in that forum, watching the triumph parade. The crowds cheer, the general rides in glory. Behind him, thousands stumble in chains. You understand now what you're really witnessing, not just victory, but the machinery of systematic terror that made that victory possible. The mass graves, the burned libraries, the crucified thousands lining roads, the systematically destroyed cities, the deliberately traumatized populations. The refined techniques of extermination passed down through military doctrine, all of it leading to this moment of celebration, where Rome shows the world what civilization looks like when power becomes absolute and cruelty becomes policy. The marble is beautiful. The monuments are magnificent. The legacy is soaked in blood that no amount of time can wash away. That's the truth about Rome. That's what lies beneath every Latin phrase, every architectural marvel, every romantic notion of classical civilization. And now you can't unsee it.